Chapter 11 of The Legends of the Jews, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Chapter 11, Zerubbabel. The successor to Daniel in the service of the king, Zerubbabel, enjoyed equally as much royal consideration and affection. He occupied a higher position than all the other servants and officials, and he and two others constituted the bodyguard of the king. Once when the king lay wrapped in deep slumber, his guards resolved to write down what each of them considered the mightiest thing in the world, and he who wrote the sage's saying should be given rich presents and rewards by the king. What they wrote they laid under the pillow on which the head of the king rested, that he might not delay to make a decision after he awoke. The first one wrote, "Wine is the mightiest thing there is." The second wrote, "The king is the mightiest on earth." And the third, Zerubbabel, wrote, "Women are the mightiest in the world, but truth prevails over all else." When the king awoke and he perused the document, he summoned the grandees of his realm and the three youths as well. Each of the three was called upon to justify his saying. In eloquent words, the first described the potency of wine. When it takes possession of the senses of a man, he forgets grief and sorrow. Still more beautiful and convincing were the words of the second speaker, when his turn came to establish the truth of his saying that the king was the mightiest on earth. Finally, Zerubbabel depicted in glowing words the power of woman, who rules even over kings. But, he continued, truth is supreme over all. The whole earth asks for truth. The heavens sing the praises of truth. All creation quakes and trembles before truth. Naught of wrong can be found in truth. Unto truth belongeth the might, the dominion, the power, and the glory of all times. Blessed be the God of truth. When Zerubbabel ceased from speaking, the assembly broke out into the words, "Great is truth, it is mightier than all else." The king was so charmed with the wisdom of Zerubbabel that he said to him, "Ask for aught thou wishest, it shall be granted thee." Zerubbabel required nothing for himself. He only sought permission of the king to restore Jerusalem, rebuild the sanctuary, and return the holy temple vessels to the place whence they had been carried off. Not only did Darius grant what Zerubbabel wished for, not only did he give him letters of safe conduct, but he also conferred numerous privileges upon the Jews who accompanied Zerubbabel to Palestine, and he sent abundant presents to the temple and its officers. As unto his predecessor Daniel, so unto Zerubbabel God vouchsafed a knowledge of the secrets of the future. Especially the archangel Metatron dealt kindly with him. Besides revealing to him the time at which the Messiah would appear, he brought about an interview between the Messiah and Zerubbabel. In reality, Zerubbabel was none other than Nehemiah, who was given this second name because he was born in Babylon. Richly endowed as Zerubbabel Nehemiah was with admirable qualities, he yet did not lack faults. He was excessively self-complacent, and he did not hesitate to fasten a stigma publicly upon his predecessors in the office of governor in the land of Judah, among whom was so excellent a man as Daniel. To punish him for these transgressions, the book of Ezra does not bear the name of its real author, Nehemiah. When Darius felt his end approach, he appointed his son-in-law Cyrus, who had hitherto reigned only over Persia, to be the ruler over his kingdom as well. His wish was honored by the princes of Media and Persia. After Darius had departed this life, Cyrus was proclaimed king. In the very first year of his reign, Cyrus summoned the most distinguished of the Jews to appear before him, and he gave them permission to return to Palestine and rebuild the temple at Jerusalem. More than this, he pledged himself to contribute to the temple service in proportion to his means, and pay honor to the God who had invested him with strength to subdue the Chaldeans. These actions of Cyrus partly flowed from his own pious inclinations, and partly were due to his desire to accomplish the dying behests of Darius, who had admonished him to give the Jews the opportunity of rebuilding the temple. When the first sacrifice was to be brought by the company of Jews who returned to Jerusalem under the leadership of Ezra and set about restoring the temple, they missed the celestial fire which had dropped from heaven on the altar in the time of Moses, and had not been extinguished so long as the temple stood. They turned in supplication to God to be instructed by him. The celestial fire had been hidden by Jeremiah at the time of the destruction of the holy city, and the law did not permit them to bring strange fire upon the altar of God. An old man suddenly remembered the spot in which Jeremiah had buried the holy fire, and he led the elders thither. They rolled away the stone covering the spot, and from under it appeared a spring, flowing not with water, but with a sort of oil. Ezra ordered this fluid to be sprinkled upon the altar, and forthwith an all-consuming flame shot up. The priests themselves scattered in fright, but after the temple and its vessels were purified by the flame, it confined itself to the altar, never more to leave it, for the priest guarded it so that it might not be extinguished. Among the band of returned exiles were the prophets Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Each one of them had a place of the greatest importance to fill in the rebuilding of the temple. By the first, the people were shown the plan of the altar, which was larger than the one that had stood in Solomon's temple. The second informed them of the exact location of the altar, and the third taught them that the sacrifices might be brought on the holy place even before the completion of the temple. On the authority of one of the prophets, the Jews, on their return from Babylonia, gave up their original Hebrew characters and rewrote the Torah in the Assyrian characters still in use at this day. While the temple work was in progress, the builders found the skull of Araunah, the owner of the temple site in the time of David. The priests, unlearned as they were, could not decide to what extent the corpse lying there had defiled the holy place. It was for this that Haggai poured out his reproaches upon them. Ezra. The complete resettlement of Palestine took place under the direction of Ezra, or as the scriptures sometimes call him, Malachi. He had not been present at the earlier attempts to restore the sanctuary because he could not leave his old teacher Baruch, who was too advanced in years to venture upon the difficult journey to the Holy Land. In spite of Ezra's persuasive efforts, it was but a comparatively small portion of the people that joined the procession winding its way westward to Palestine. For this reason, the prophetical spirit did not show itself during the existence of the Second Temple. Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi were the last representatives of prophecy. Nothing was more surprising than the apathy of the Levites. They manifested no desire to return to Palestine. Their punishment was the loss of the tithes, which were later given to the priest, though the Levites had the first claim upon them. In restoring the Jewish state in Palestine, Ezra cherished two hopes: to preserve the purity of the Jewish race and to spread the study of the Torah until it should become the common property of the people at large. To help on his first purpose, he inveighed against marriages between the Jews and the nations round about. He himself had carefully worked out his own pedigree before he consented to leave Babylonia, and in order to perpetuate the purity of the families and groups remaining in the East, he took all the unfit with him to Palestine. In the realization of his second hope, the spread of the Torah, Ezra was so zealous and efficient that it was justly said of him, if Moses had not anticipated him, Ezra would have received the Torah. In a sense, he was indeed a second Moses. The Torah had fallen into neglect and oblivion in his day, and he restored and reestablished it in the minds of his people. It is due to him chiefly that it was divided up into portions to be read annually, Sabbath after Sabbath in the synagogues, and he it was likewise who originated the idea of rewriting the Pentateuch in Assyrian characters. To further his purpose still more, he ordered additional schools for children to be established everywhere, though the old ones sufficed to satisfy the demand. He thought the rivalry between the old and the new institutions would redound to the benefit of the pupils. Ezra is the originator of institutions known as the 10 Regulations of Ezra. They are the following: 1. Readings from the Torah on Sabbath afternoons. 2. Readings from the Torah on Mondays and Thursdays. 3. Sessions of the court on Mondays and Thursdays. 4. To do laundry work on Thursdays, not Fridays. 5. To eat garlic on Friday on account of its salutary action. 6. To bake bread early in the morning that it may be ready for the poor whenever they ask for some. 7. Women are to cover the lower parts of their bodies with a garment called sinar. 8. Before taking a ritual bath, the hair is to be combed. 9. The ritual bath prescribed for the unclean is to cover the case of one who desires to offer prayer or study the law. 10. Permission to peddlers to sell cosmetics to women in the towns. Ezra was not only a great teacher of his people and their wise leader, he was also their advocate with the Celestials, to whom his relation was of a peculiarly intimate character. Once he addressed a prayer to God in which he complained of the misfortune of Israel and the prosperity of the heathen nations. Thereupon the angel Uriel appeared to him and instructed him how that evil has its appointed time in which to run its course, as the dead have their appointed time to sojourn in the nether world. Ezra could not rest satisfied with this explanation, and in response to his further questions, 7 prophetic visions were vouchsafed him and interpreted by the angel for him. They typified the whole course of history up to his day and disclosed the future to his eyes. In the 7th vision, he heard a voice from a thorn bush, like Moses aforetimes, and it admonished him to guard in his heart the secrets revealed to him. The same voice had given Moses a similar injunction. These words shalt thou publish, those shalt thou keep secret. Then his early translation from earth was announced to him. He besought God to let the Holy Spirit descend upon him before he died, so that he might record all that had happened since the creation of the world, as it was set down in the Torah, and guide men upon the path that leads to God. Hereupon God bade him take the 5 experienced scribes, Sarga, Dabria, Seleucia, Ethan, and Aziel, with him into retirement, and dictate to them for 40 days. After 1 day spent with these writers in isolation, remote from the city and from men, a voice admonished him, Ezra, open thy mouth, and drink whereof I give thee to drink. He opened his mouth, and a chalice was handed to him, filled to the brim with a liquid that flowed like water, but in color resembled fire. His mouth opened to drink, and for 40 days it was not closed. During all that time, the 5 scribes put down in signs they did not understand. They were the newly adopted Hebrew characters, all that Ezra dictated to them, and it made 94 books. At the end of the 40 days period, God spoke to Ezra thus, the 24 books of the Holy Scriptures thou shalt publish, for the worthy and the unworthy alike to read. But the last 70 books thou shalt withhold from the populace, for the perusal of the wise of thy people. On account of his literary activity, he is called the scribe of the science of the Supreme Being unto all eternity. Having finished his task, Ezra was removed from this mundane world, and he entered the life everlasting. But his death did not occur in the Holy Land. It overtook him at Khuzistan in Persia on his journey to King Artachshashta. At Raccia in Mesopotamia, there stood as late as the 12th century the synagogue founded by Ezra when he was journeying from Babylonia to Palestine. At his grave, over which columns of fire are often seen to hover at night, a miracle once happened. A shepherd fell asleep by the side of it. Ezra appeared to him and bade him tell the Jews that they were to transport his bier to another spot. If the master of the new place refused assent, he was to be warned to yield permission, else all the inhabitants of his place would perish. At first the master refused to allow the necessary excavations to be made. Only after a large number of the non-Jewish inhabitants of the place had been stricken down suddenly, he consented to have the corpse transported thither. As soon as the grave was opened, the plague ceased. Shortly before the death of Ezra, the city of Babylon was totally destroyed by the Persians. There remained but a portion of the wall which was impregnable, by human strength. All the prophecies hurled against the city by the prophets were accomplished. To this day there is a spot on its site, which no animal can pass, unless some of the earth of the place is strewn upon it. The men of the Great Assembly. At the same time with Ezra, or to speak more accurately, under his direction, the Great Assembly carried on its beneficent activities, which laid the foundations of rabbinical Judaism and constituted the binding link between the Jewish prophet and the Jewish sage. The great men who belonged to this august assembly once succeeded, through the efficacy of their prayers, in laying hands upon the seducers unto sin, and confining them, to prevent them from doing more mischief. Thus they banished from the world the desire unto idolatry. They tried to do the same to the desire unto lustfulness. This evil adversary warned them against making away with him, for the world would cease to exist without him. For 3 days they kept him a prisoner, but then they had to dismiss him and let him go free. They found that not even an egg was to be had, for sexual appetite had vanished from the world. However, he did not escape altogether unscathed. They plastered up his eyes, and from that time on he gave up inflaming the passions of men against their blood relations. Among the decrees and ordinances of the Great Assembly, the most prominent is the fixation of the prayer of the 18 benedictions. The several benedictions composing this prayer date back to remote ancient times. The patriarchs were their authors, and the work of the Great Assembly was to put them together in the order in which we now have them. We know how each of the benedictions originated. 1. When Abraham was saved from the furnace, angels spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, the shield of Abraham," which is the essence of the first of the 18. 2. When Isaac lay stunned by fright on Mount Moriah, God sent his dew to revive him, whereupon the angels spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who quickenest the dead." 3. When Jacob arrived at the gates of heaven and proclaimed the holiness of God, the angels spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, thou holy God." 4. When Pharaoh was about to make Joseph the ruler over Egypt, and it appeared that he was unacquainted with the 70 tongues, which an Egyptian sovereign must know, the angel Gabriel came and taught him those languages, whereupon the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who graciously bestowest knowledge." 5. When Reuben committed the trespass against his father, sentence of death was pronounced upon him in the heavens. But when he repented, he was permitted to continue to live. And the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who hast delight in repentance." 6. When Judah had committed a trespass against Tamar, and confessing his guilt, obtained forgiveness, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who pardonest greatly." 7. When Israel was sore oppressed by Mizraim, and God proclaimed his redemption, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who redeemest Israel." 8. When the angel Raphael came to Abraham to soothe the pain of his circumcision, the angels spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who healest the sick." 9. When Israel sowing in the land of the Philistines bore an abundant harvest, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who blessest the years." 10. When Jacob was reunited with Joseph and Simon in Egypt, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who gatherest the dispersed of thy people Israel." 11. When the Torah was revealed, and God communicated the code of laws to Moses, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who lovest righteousness and justice." 12. When the Egyptians were drowned in the Red Sea, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who shatterest the enemy and humiliatest the presumptuous." 13. When Joseph laid his hands on the eyes of his father Jacob, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who art the stay and the support of the pious." 14. When Solomon built the temple, the angel spoke, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, who buildest Jerusalem." 15. When the children of Israel singing hymns of praise unto God, passed through the Red Sea. The angel spoke, Blessed art thou, O Lord, who causest the hour of salvation to sprout forth. 16. When God lent a gracious ear to the prayer of the suffering Israelites in Egypt, the angel spoke, Blessed art thou, O Lord, who hearest our prayer. 17. When the Shekinah descended between the cherubim in the tabernacle, the angel spoke, Blessed art thou, O Lord, who wilt restore thy divine presence to Jerusalem. 18. When Solomon dedicated his temple, the angel spoke, Blessed art thou, O Lord, whose name is worthy of praise. 19. When Israel entered the Holy Land, the angel spoke, Blessed art thou, O Lord, who establishest peace. End of chapter 11. The return of the captivity.